right, so you should have already completed Africans in America, and now this is Slave Auction, 1859. Before you read or listen to me reading the story about slave auctions, you should be answering numbers 1 and 2 on this file. So number 1 says, before reading the passage, list the things you already know about slave auctions. You should be putting your answer in there. You can type it or write it. Now, you might not know anything about them, and you could put that. I mean, I understand that some of this stuff you just don't know anything about it, and that's why we're learning about it. But if you think you know something about them, you could write it here. And then number 2, also before you read, list the things you would like to learn about slave auctions. And you could list anything that you want to learn here. And then number 3 is the one that you'll do either while you're reading or listening to me read, or after I've read it or you've read it. So number 3, after reading the passage, list the things that you learned about slave auctions. If you're going to continue to listen to this and follow along with me as I read, you could have it in a split screen with your document on one side and the video playing on the other, and just keep hitting pause when you want to add something to number 3. Now, it's very possible that you're going to need more space to enter in information that you're learning about the slave auctions, and if that's the case, feel free to just keep hitting enter and add more space. This is a working, living document for you, so make it look however it works for you. It doesn't have to stay in the exact format that I gave it to you, okay? Just want to clarify that. All right, so if you still need to answer numbers 1 and 2, just press pause right now before you actually listen to me read it out loud. I'm going to go ahead and open the link. This will take us to a website called eyewitnesstohistory.com, which, by the way, is a really fantastic website for eyewitness accounts, people who are actually there throughout history. And you can see all the different tabs on here. There are eyewitness accounts from the ancient world, the Middle Ages and Renaissance, 17th century, 18th, 19th, Civil War, Old West, 20th century, World War I, World War II, so on and so forth. It's a great website because you're hearing it from people who were actually there, which is always the best way to learn history. Also, something I want to point out, if you click on the capital A's up here in the Smart Search bar, it gives you an option to show it in reader view. That's always a nice option if you want to just clean it up and see a better image without all of the distractions and ads and things in the margins. So I'm actually going to read from the reader view, and you can follow along with me. And like I said, you can keep pressing pause every time you want to add something that you've learned on your document. Slave Auction 1859. In early March 1859, an enormous slave auction took place at the race course 3 miles outside Savannah, Georgia. 436 slaves were to be put on the auction block, including men, women, children, and infants. Word of the sale had spread through the South for weeks, drawing potential buyers from North and South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana. All of Savannah's available hotel rooms and any other lodging spaces were quickly appropriated by the influx of visitors. In the days running up to the auction, daily excursions were made from the city to the race course to inspect, evaluate, and determine an appropriate bid for the human merchandise on display. The sale's magnitude was the result of the breakup of an old family estate that included 2 plantations. The majority of the slaves had never been sold before. Most had spent their entire lives on one of the 2 plantations included in the sale. The rules of the auction stipulated that the slaves would be sold as families, defined as a husband and wife and any offspring. However, there was no guarantee that this rule would be adhered to in all cases. The sale gained such renown that it attracted the attention of Horace Greeley, editor of the New York Tribune, one of America's most influential newspapers at the time. Greeley was an abolitionist and staunchly opposed to slavery. He sent a reporter to cover the auction in order to reveal to his readers the barbarity inherent in one human being's ability to own and sell another. Preparation. So this now is the quote from the person who was there. The slaves remained at the race course, some of them for more than a week, and all of them for 4 days before the sale. They were brought in thus early that buyers who desired to inspect them might enjoy that privilege, although none of them were sold at private sale. For these preliminary days, their shed was constantly visited by speculators. The Negroes were examined with as little consideration as if they had been brutes indeed. The buyers pulling their mouths open to see their teeth, pinching their limbs to find how muscular they were, walking them up and down to detect any signs of lameness, making them stoop and bend in different ways that they might be certain there was no concealed rupture or wound. And in addition to all this treatment, asking them scores of questions relative to their qualifications and accomplishments. All these humiliations were submitted to without a murmur, and in some instances with good-natured cheerfulness, where the slave liked the appearance of the proposed buyer and fancied that he might prove a kind master. The following curiously sad scene is the type of a score of others that were there enacted. Elisha, chattel number 5 in the catalog, had taken a fancy to a benevolent-looking middle-aged gentleman who was inspecting the stock, and thus used his powers of persuasion to induce the benevolent man to purchase him, with his wife, boy, and girl, Molly, Israel, and Savanda, chattels numbers 6, 7, and 8. The earnestness with which the poor fellow pressed his suit, knowing as he did that perhaps the happiness of his whole life depended on his success, was interesting, and the arguments he used were most pathetic. He made no appeal to the feelings of the buyer. He rested no hope on his charity and kindness, but only strove to show how well worth his dollars were the bone and blood he was entreating him to buy. Look at me, master. Am prime rice planter. Sure you won't find a better man than me. No better than on the whole plantation, not a bit old yet. Do more work than ever. Do carpenter work too, little. Better buy me, master. I'll be good servant, master. Molly too, my wife. Suffus rate rice hand. Oh, first rate. She's a first rate rice hand. Almost as good as me. Stand out your Molly and let the gentleman see. Sorry, I was trying to translate it into language you would understand. Obviously, it's slang. Molly advances with her hands crossed on her bosom and makes a quick, short curtsy and stands mute, looking appealingly in the benevolent man's face. But Elisha talks all the faster. Show master your arm, Molly. Good arm, that master. She do a heap of work, more with that arm yet. Let the good master see your teeth, Molly. See that, master? Teeth all regular, all good. She's a young gal yet. Come out here, Israel. Walk around and let the gentleman see how spry you be. Then, pointing to the 3-year-old girl who stood with her chubby hand to her mouth, holding onto her mother's dress, and uncertain what to make of the strange scene. Little Vardy's only a chilly yet. Make prime gal by and by. Better buy us, master. We are first-rate bargain, and so on. But the benevolent gentleman found where he could drive a closer bargain, and so bought somebody else. The sale. The buyers who were present, to the number of about 200, clustered around the platform, while the Negroes who were not likely to be immediately wanted gathered into sad groups in the background to watch the progress of the selling in which they were so sorrowfully interested. The wind howled outside, and through the open side of the building, the driving rain kept pouring in. The bar downstairs ceased for a short time its brisk trade. The buyers lit fresh cigars, got ready their catalogs and pencils, and the first lot of human chattels were led upon the stand, not by a white man, but by a sleek mulatto, himself a slave, and who seems to regard the selling of his brethren, in which he so glibly assists, as a capital joke. It had been announced that the Negroes would be sold in families, that is to say, a man would not be parted from his wife, or a mother from a very young child. There is perhaps as much policy as humanity in this arrangement, for thereby many aged and unserviceable people are disposed of who otherwise would not find a ready sale. The expression on the faces of all who stepped on the block was always the same, and told of more anguish than it is in the power of words to express. Blighted homes, crushed hopes, and broken hearts were the sad story to be read in all the anxious faces. Some of them regarded the sale with perfect indifference, never making a motion save to turn from one side to the other at the word of the dapper Mr. Bryan, that all the crowd might have a fair view of their proportions, and then, when the sale was accomplished, stepping down from the block without caring to cast even a look at the buyer, who now held all their happiness in his hands. Others, again, strained their eyes with eager glances from one buyer to another as the bidding went on, trying with earnest attention to follow the rapid voice of the auctioneer. Sometimes 2 persons only would be bidding for the same chattel, all the others having resigned the contest, and then the poor creature on the block, conceiving an instantaneous preference for one of the buyers over the other, would regard the rivalry with the intensest interest, the expression of his face changing with every bid, settling into a half smile of joy if the favorite buyer persevered unto the end and secured the property, and settling down into a look of hopeless despair if the other won the victory. The auctioneer brought up Joshua's Molly and family. He announced that Molly insisted that she was lame in her left foot, and perversely would walk lame, although for his part he did not believe a word of it. He had caused her to be examined by an eminent physician in Savannah, which medical light had declared that Joshua's Molly was not lame, but was only shamming. However, the gentlemen must judge for themselves and bid accordingly. So Molly was put through her paces and compelled to trot up and down along the stage, to go up and down the steps, and to exercise her feet in various ways, but always with the same result. The left foot would be lame. She was finally sold for $695, equivalent to approximately $15,300 in today's dollars. Whether she really was lame or not, no one knows but herself, but it must be remembered that to a slave, a lameness or anything that decreases his market value is a thing to be rejoiced over. A man in the prime of life, worth $1,600, equivalent to approximately $35,200 in today's dollars, or thereabouts, can have little hope of ever being able, by any little savings of his own, to purchase his liberty. But let him have a rupture, or lose a limb, or sustain any other injury that renders him of much less service to his owner, and reduces his value to $300 or $400, and he may hope to accumulate that sum and eventually purchase his liberty. Freedom without health is infinitely sweeter than health without freedom. And so the great sale went on for 2 long days, during which time there were sold 429 men, women, and children. There were 436 announced to be sold, but a few were detained on the plantations by sickness. The total amount of the sale foots up $303,850, equivalent to approximately $6,700,000 in today's dollars.